Obviously, the two-party system is not the only way to do things. So let's take a look at a couple of party systems that they use in different countries. So we're going to start with a multi-party system. And we see an example here. This is the United Kingdom, and this is way back, but they have multiple political parties. And so sometimes in order to pass laws, two parties have to come together to form a coalition, and that's what we've got going on here. So let's take a look at how multi-party systems work. A multi-party system is any system that's going to have as few as three, but multiple political parties, right? As long as three or more regularly win stuff, we can call this a multi-party system. And this means that there is the groups are a lot smaller and there's a lot more competition. The parties have to take a different approach here. In a two-party system, you only have to be better than the other option. But here in a multi-party system, parties have to work harder to appeal to specific groups and to appeal to people's specific interests. So they have to focus more on policies and what they will do. In these issues, national politics become a lot more important. So what the big party is going to do nationally tends to dictate the way that people will vote. And so multi-party systems, even though it sounds like we're just adding extra political parties, it actually changes everything about how the system works. In that multi-party system, we said that they've got to appeal to specific interests. What we mean is they've got to find more ways to stand out. If there's only two options, you really don't have to stand out a lot. Like the voters have a very clear choice between two people, and one of them is better than the other. But in a multi-party system, you have to work more at being the best. You can't just be the second worst. In a two-party system, you can be the second worst and win the election. But in a multi-party system, you have to show ways that you are going to be the best. And so from that standpoint, negative advertising doesn't really work in a multi-party system. In a race here in the United States between Democrats and Republicans, if I just spend the whole time campaigning that the Republican is bad, then that's automatically helping voters to support the Democrats. They have no other options. In a multi-party system, if we were talking about Democrats and Republicans and libertarians, then if I spent the whole time saying Republicans are bad, that doesn't necessarily help Democrats. So negative advertising doesn't work because it does hurt your competition, but it doesn't necessarily help you. And so the parties, instead of doing negative advertising like we see so much here, they have to focus on showing the voters the ways that they would help. Multi-party systems usually result from a system that we call proportional representation. So in systems like this, people don't just vote for individual candidates in their small district. They vote for a party that they support in a larger area. So instead of just this little part of Tennessee votes for one of the 9 representatives from Tennessee, what if all of Tennessee got together and voted for the parties they liked the best? That would still mean that the Republicans won the most and the Democrats would win a few, but it's also possible that smaller third parties would get 1 seat or possibly more than that. So here the seats are divided among the parties according to the proportion of the vote that they got in the electorate. So in this case, we don't care just about first place, but we care about first place and second place and third place, and on and on. And so this allows more different types of parties to win offices. In elections like this, where you go and vote for the party, at the end of the election, the parties find out how many seats they have to fill, and the parties get to choose the members that hold office. In elections like this, you still need 51% of the votes to be able to pass laws. Passing laws is still a yes or no question, but it's not always true that a political party will have 51% of the votes. So in a multi-party system, the votes could easily be divided 34%, 33%, and 33%. And this is where the parties have to form what we call coalitions with each other. Two parties or more than two parties have to agree to work together. So they form a temporary alliance so that they have 51% of the votes. And what this does is this allows the alliance to be able to propose laws and to vote on laws and things like that. The whole idea of coalitions causes more compromise between the parties. As a voter in these elections, this is good because parties that even get a small percentage of the vote will still have some voice in the government. The voters in this case, they get to choose like the candidate that they really like the best instead of having to worry about the parties that they're competing against. So they really get to like express their preference in a different way. In parties like this, voters tend to be satisfied a little more than we are here with the two-party system because they feel like they have a lot of different options to choose from. So voters end up making a choice that really helps them. Other advantages of the multi-party system here is that smaller groups and minority groups can be helped because they might form smaller parties that represent their interests themselves. Here in the United States, the parties have to like be coalitions of different groups, and then they negotiate with each other over what policies they'll prioritize. But in a multi-party system, we might see parties formed around like minority groups that could propose policies that would help those minority groups. The other thing about multi-party systems here is that it encourages participation because there's even more chances to get involved, right? Instead of just 2 candidates for every race, there might be 3 or 4 candidates in every race. So there's a lot more opportunity for people to run for office. And like we just talked about, the voters, the people who are voting, they get to be able to vote for whichever party or whichever candidate they really support instead of having to vote for the lesser of 2 evils, which is how voters in the two-party system often feel like. There's also disadvantages to the multi-party system. We had mentioned that the two-party system is really stable because you always know what you're going to get. The multi-party system is less stable. You have all sorts of different groups that can end up gaining control, especially through coalitions. It's harder for any party to have a majority of the votes here. And so while coalitions are a good solution to that, coalitions can break up over any little issue, and then the government has to start over. We have to have new elections and all that. And it's also harder to make policy here because instead of just compromising with one group of people, you're having to compromise with multiple groups. So that makes things a little more difficult. All right, we've seen how multi-party systems work. Now let's take a look at the dreaded one-party system. So here we see our friends in China who are operating under a one-party system where only one party is allowed to participate in government, and so they control all the aspects of government. So we'll take a look at how that works and take a look at the advantages and disadvantages. A one-party system, exactly like it sounds like, means that only one political party exists. This is the case because these political parties have outlawed any political competition. In some cases, they directly outlaw other parties from existing. In other cases, they make policies to prevent other parties from being able to compete fairly. One-party systems mean that the party in power face no competition, and that also means that they don't really have to listen to the people at all because there's no alternative choice for the people to choose. So believe it or not, we do have advantages for a one-party system. Where we said a multi-party system was unstable and a two-party system is pretty stable, there's nothing more stable than the one-party system. There is never a change in government, so you always know what to expect from the party. There's also no conflict among groups. Like there's less conflict because all the people that want to participate in politics have to come together in one party. It doesn't mean that everyone's happy with the party, but like if you want to participate in government, you're going to have to join the existing party. So it limits conflict and competition that way. And the other thing here is the government is very strong. One party is going to control everything. The government is going to have all kinds of power to pass policies and turn them into action. So like it's very good at like, solving problems or like stopping emergencies and things like that, even if the people don't particularly have a lot of choices. The disadvantages of the one-party system are pretty obvious. The party does nothing to respond to the people. Since there's no competition and no other choices, the party doesn't have to do anything to like make sure that the people are pleased. So the party doesn't have to pay attention to the people or respond to their wishes or their policy preferences or anything like that. And that's because there are no choices. This is completely non-democratic. The people don't have choices in the election. They don't really have a voice in the government at all. All right, so we took a look at multi-party systems and we took a look at one-party systems, and we see the good sides and bad sides of both of those ways of doing things. Now let's get back to the two-party system here in the United States and go through the party organization so we can see how the party operates from day to day.